may be old enough to remember that back in the 90s, the fad was zero fat. You had garbage, zero-fat cookies and treats that were filled with carbs, trans fats, and other toxic nonsense. Then somewhere around the turn of the millennium, scientists and nutritionists finally realized that fat is actually good for you, at least some fats.
What do you know?
This is where you saw coconut oil explode on the scene. I was a huge fan, and I still am. But before then, they would have told me to fill most of my remaining 1,300 calories with carbs. The big fad right now is Keto Diets, which I've tried and tested for almost a decade now, ever since Peter Attia released his groundbreaking hour-long video on the subject back in 2013. And its advocates would say close to all of that 1,300 should be fat. And you know what? You'd probably get some pretty decent results with that, until you run out of energy in a month or so. But carbs are not poison, and they're not bad, and the majority of you out there do not need to eliminate or even severely restrict your carbs. True, you don't want to be like the majority of Americans who consume way too many carbs. But you also don't want to deal with the side effects of a severely low-carb diet. Trust me, the energy drop and the cravings can be really miserable, and they eventually affect your workouts, and they're not necessary for great results. Your body is designed to process carbs and use them for energy. Did you ever think about that? Why cut it out? Of course, not all carbs are created equal. More on that in a second. But I think what many lay people who cut out all the carbs don't realize is that they're probably putting themselves into a calorie deficit by doing so. And the calorie deficit is doing most of the heavy lifting there. They probably don't realize that though, because they're not counting calories. The only times I would cut out carbs severely anymore is if I was already very low body fat, like below 7%, or if I was trying to burn fat at breakneck speed, like when I entered into the contest for that very thing. Now, there is persuasive evidence of the keto diet having serious health benefits in fighting cancer and replenishing stem cells. Same thing with fasting, by the way. But that's more of a health treatment and not a method for burning fat and gaining muscle, and that's what we're focusing on here. Here's my easy trick. If you're staying within your limited calories and you're shooting for a high protein goal, those two restrictions will pretty naturally fill out the rest of those calories with carbs and fat at the same time. In other words, while I focus on eating lots of protein, I'm naturally consuming carbs and fat because there's few real-world pure protein sources like whey isolate almost is. So for easy explanation, let's imagine I want a sandwich. Go to a sandwich shop and what's the first thing they prioritize? A big, huge, carby hoagie bun. That's like their main ingredient. Then look, 2 wimpy pieces of meat. That's your protein. Plus, I guess some cheese and bacon, which also adds a lot of fat calories. Some pointless shredded lettuce, which is pretty devoid of nutrients. Look at this thing. It's almost like they're trying to avoid giving you protein. Lots of calories you don't need. Let's get this thing out of here. Now, here's what it would look like if I were prioritizing protein. First of all, low-calorie bread, only 100 calories per slice, because here we have 7 slices of turkey breast, which is 153 calories, and that covers my protein requirement for the meal. Add a little bit of low-cal mayo and some zero-calorie mustard, and I'm at 383 calories now. That's almost perfect size, and the last 17 calories can be baby spinach, which is way better than regular empty lettuce. Look at this thing. Can you tell the priorities were different making this sandwich over the other one? I made sure my protein was covered, which limited how many calories I had for the other stuff, like the bread, etc. Which means there's no way I could use the hoagie bread. I had to switch to the low-cal bread, or maybe even a wrap. If you're using an app, which I'm sure you will, you can mix and match these ingredients and get a real-time total of the calories as you go. This sandwich would end up being about 38% protein, 52% carbs, and 10% fat. In a perfect world, I'd like to see that number be more fat than carbs, but my protein is almost spot on, and that's most important to me. If you get your proportion of protein right on every meal, it will be right for your whole diet automatically. Okay, one more example. I'm making a rice bowl with chicken breast and veggies. This meal needs to be 400 calories. For protein, let's take 35% of 400. It's 140 calories for chicken. Type chicken breast in your app, or you can use the wonderful website Calorie King, and you can see that, hey, look at that. This wasn't planned. One single 4.2 ounce breast is 142 calories. So I need to weigh out 4.2 ounces of chicken breast, and yes, you need to buy a kitchen scale, no exceptions. Let's look up brown rice. 1 cup is 260 calories. Wow, this one's kind of making itself. All right, I'm now at 358 calories. I've got 42 calories to fill with whatever else I want. Soy sauce is astronomically low calorie, 17 for 2 tablespoons. What else? Veggies? Definitely. I've got 25 calories left for veggies. Or do I? Let me tell you one of my favorite tricks. I give myself full allowance to eat as many high-fiber veggies as I want. I don't even count them. You will get exhausted from eating before you ever eat enough of those to make a dent in your diet. So I'm throwing in as much broccoli and cauliflower and spinach as I want. That last point bears some explanation. Did you know that not all fats and all carbs are created equal? I'm sure you did. You've always heard to eat more whole wheat products rather than processed ones like white bread, right? Well, why is that? Okay, begin nutrition class. Switch your brain on for a second. Feel free to post all the scientific data I'm skipping over here down in the comments, but I'm keeping this basic enough for the layman to use in diet and exercise planning, and that's adequate enough. Carbohydrates are sugars. If it's a small, simple chain of sugar, like table sugar, we call that a simple carbohydrate. Your body can absorb these right away, so they go straight into your bloodstream and create a spike. Sugar is actually terrible to have in your bloodstream, like sandpaper in your vessels, which is why diabetics with no sugar control have damage to tiny capillaries in their body located in the eyes and extremities like hands and feet. Imagine pouring that table sugar right into your eye, and you can imagine what I'm talking about. Fortunately for you, unless you're diabetic, the sugar doesn't stay in your bloodstream long enough to cause any damage because insulin stuffs it into your cells for them to use. This sudden spike in sugar is followed by a drop in blood sugar, which makes you feel hungry again shortly after eating it, which is where the tiredness or the sugar crash after a high-carb lunch comes from. When sugar molecules clump together into complex chains, we call that a complex carbohydrate. Complex carbohydrates are found in veggies like potatoes, peas, yams, etc. They call these complex carbohydrates starch. Your body can't just absorb this complex chain without breaking it down first, which takes time. The sugar hits your body slowly over time so that you don't have a spike or the crash that follows it. It's also in your digestive system longer, which means you feel fuller longer. Huge bonus! Interestingly, machinery can do this process for your body, like in the white bread example. Whole wheat is a complex carb, but once it's chopped up and processed and bleached and God knows what else by machinery, those complex chains are broken down into simple ones, meaning it's practically the same thing as just eating plain table sugar. Now you know why you were always told why unprocessed food is better for you. Or at least one reason. Some vegetables are a little different. They have no or negligible amounts of starch and are high in fiber, which is a non-digestible plant particle that cleans your systems out and has a whole host of other benefits. If your body can't digest it, then it truly has no calories. You can swallow a whole nickel, but you didn't really ingest 5 grams of nickel because, let's just say you're in for a nice surprise later when someone leaves a tip in your toilet bowl for you. Still with me? Okay, nutrition lesson's over. Those high-fiber veggies are green and leafy veggies, and I let myself eat an almost infinite amount of them, especially when I'm tempted or feeling snacky. A full belly does wonders to fight off cravings. Broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, mushrooms, asparagus, sprouts, cucumber, green beans, herbs, squash, kale, chard, tomatoes. Man, the list is huge. One of my secret weapons is this bag of veggies from Costco. Anytime I'm still hungry at night after I've met my calorie requirement, I heat up a bowl of these, sprinkle some Lawry seasoning salt over them for great flavor, also no calories, and after that I'm no longer craving anything. Like I said, you'd be amazed what a full belly does for a craving. The high starch carbs are the ones that I count my calories for, but I still include them in my meals. In fact, the ideal meal combines a protein, a high starch carb, and a high fiber carb. Every meal should follow this formula. This is the 3-punch knockout for having healthy meals that leave you stuffed and satisfied so you don't resort to snacking on junk or going for a simple carb, high calorie disaster food. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just remember it's that simple. Choose a lean protein, choose a high starch carb, and choose a high fiber carb. Look up and print out a list of each category. I'm serious. I'm not going to type it all out for you. Look, there's one right here. Print it out now. Tape it in your kitchen. Then just pick one from each list. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
All right, I get it!
And if I still feel like snacking, sometimes you just need some good fat. Fat is very satiating for a variety of chemical reasons that I'm not going to get into. But sometimes if you just eat peanut butter or cashew butter, coconut oil, nuts, avocados, then you will feel very satisfied.
That's what she said.
And that fat is good for your brain, your skin, your hair. My ideal snack is just a spoonful of all organic peanut or cashew butter. Or put it on a celery stick, which is another food you can eat an unlimited amount of. But don't believe the myth that it somehow has negative calories.
Nice.
Only ice cubes could technically qualify for that because they take some energy to eat them. Be careful though, as those calories must still be counted, and they are high in calories. In fact, nuts are just as calorie dense as chocolate.
Wow.
Did you know that? So by all means eat them, but always count those calories. And remember, not all fats are equal. Animal fats should be avoided. The aforementioned natural fats are highly recommended, however, especially coconut oil or MCT oil. In fact, try blending MCT oil with your coffee. But it must be blended in a blender. You can't just mix it up. Still with me? Okay, I promise it's almost done. There's just one more thing that I really need to share with you. Then some practical tips for doing all this. Do you remember how I said in another video how I work out to live a better life, not live to work out? You don't want your life to revolve around this with an iron fist.
Nope.
I've heard the goal should be 90% adherence to these principles while letting yourself off the hook the other 10%. That sounds fine to me. That's maybe a couple of cheat meals per week. But your little jerk cravings will gradually take over if you let yourself binge on a cheat meal.
Look what you did, you little jerk.
One major cheat meal can easily undo all a week's work. After all, I'm only creating about a 5,600 calorie deficit per week. Your body can process something like 10,000 calories per day. I once let myself off the hook for a 2-day road trip to San Diego and ate candy and junk food the whole time. It was especially bad because I was pretty lean at the time, like around 5%, so my body was ready to snap back into gaining fat like a slingshot. In 2 days, I gained several percentages in body fat. It was months of work wasted, and it took me months to get back to ultra lean again. So by all means, eat that brownie or ice cream or whatever, but you still need to count those calories. Even if you go way over your limit, you owe it to yourself to still count every extra calorie. Don't sneak them away from yourself because you'll never know what you're doing wrong if you don't keep track. At least this way, you'll be able to see where you went wrong if you don't make progress one week. Some people plan their cheat meals into their weekly diet regimen. Maybe that works for you, and if so, go for it. However, I take on a more organic approach and wait until I have a really strong craving, and here's why. Let's say I planned my cheat meal on Sunday, so I have some Oreos and milk on Sunday, even though I was doing just fine with my diet anyway. Then suddenly, when Monday rolls around, I just have to have some ice cream, and I can't get it out of my mind. I end up cheating and eating the ice cream. Well, now I just doubled my cheat meals completely unnecessarily. It'd been better if I just waited until that craving hit naturally on Monday, then count that as my spontaneous cheat meal. I've had huge success using this method of sort of following my body's natural hormone ebb and flow, which makes my diet feel much less restrictive and less likely for me to resent it. I feel like I'm mostly free to do what I want, and I do the same thing with rest days, which we'll cover next week. Waiting until I'm just feeling too beat, then let myself take the day off or sleep in, and it naturally ends up being about once a week, which is what I'm shooting for anyway. If you let yourself feel too restricted or too resentful of your diet, and especially too hungry, you will suddenly have a miserable binge where you just can't stop yourself from eating a whole tub of ice cream or half your pantry full of junk. Oh, the horror of those memories. Practical tips. Make your meals ahead of time. It's the only way you're going to ensure that you stick to this. Eventually, you'll get so used to them that you'll be able to make them on the fly when it's mealtime, but until then, you're just setting yourself up for temptation and failure when you get hungry. I typically make food in big batches and pre-measure and label it ahead of time for the whole week. It might take a little while at first, but after a while, it was just a couple hours on the weekend and everything was set for the whole week. If money isn't an issue for you, there are companies that can do this for you. Search for it in your local city and they'll plan your calories, protein, everything, and all you need to do is go pick up the pre-made meals. Always have a meal ready to go, or at least good food ready to go. Hunger will kill the best of plans. You're probably going to spend more money on groceries, but you're going to spend less money eating out, hopefully. If you must eat out at a restaurant, don't consider it a lost cause. There's all kinds of healthy options on almost all menus now, amazingly, even at McDonald's. So try and avoid the fried, the sugary, and the super starchy, French fries, shakes, etc. They have tons of calories and don't fill you up for long. Their grilled chicken salad might not be as fun, but it's only 161 calories and it's 47% protein. Red sauces are almost always lower calorie than white sauces. Liquid calories are a freaking nightmare. Juice, energy drinks, and especially soda have a zillion calories packed into them and hardly leave you full or satisfied at all. I strongly recommend cutting them out completely. You need to capitalize on every calorie you consume, making sure it's satisfying and fulfilling and working towards your goals. If you are addicted to soda, try to switch to some kind of seltzer water, flavored seltzer water that doesn't have any calories. Light mayo, light ranch, mustard, and spray butter are lifesavers. Just as much flavor in almost all applications, but way fewer calories. Mustard actually has 0 calories. While the whole foods are usually always better for your overall health, in very small quantities like this, I think they're just fine. Because you should think of how your overall health is improving from you lowering your body fat and keeping a positive, happy attitude, having something that tastes good in tiny doses but big flavor instead. The same can be said for low-fat dairy products. Whole fat is better for you, but low fat still has the protein and probiotics with far fewer calories. Typically, if there's junk in the house, you'll end up eating it. Set yourself up for success instead of failure by getting it out of the house and keep it out. This might not be possible for you if you live with others, so keep healthy snacks on hand for you when you're tempted. Remember, if you get hungry, that kills the best of plans. Restaurants flash freeze food that they need to preserve for later. You can sort of do this too. As soon as you cook extra meat, throw it in the freezer in Tupperware before it has a chance to cool down. It will last far longer that way and be fresh when you thaw or heat it up in the microwave. Let me share with you some of my personal power meals. Super simple, super quick and easy, super healthy when I'm in a pinch. The more astoundingly easy options that you have, the more likely you're going to stick with it when you're tired and your guard's down. Oatmeal and protein powder. Scoop them into baggies, keep the baggies in your desk at work so you can always pour them in a bowl, get hot water from the coffee maker spigot, and you have a complete meal right there. I used to keep about a dozen of these in my desk at any time. Those frozen Costco veggies. Those frozen Costco veggies and a side can of tuna. You can mix mustard with the tuna and it's surprisingly good. Dave Draper swears by his tuna and water diet to clear your mind, get focused, and kick off a good diet. If you drink alcohol, try to eliminate or at least severely limit beer. Straight liquor is best, mixed with seltzer water and a twist of lemon or lime. There are 7 calories per gram of alcohol, and this is hotly debated, but I personally do not believe that they count. Not based on my experience and careful tracking. And that's not talking about super sugary mixed drinks. Those definitely count, but that's the added crap, not the alcohol itself. Alcohol is not used like other nutrients. It's technically a poison that your liver has to filter out. The real danger to your diet from alcohol is how easy it is to overeat when you're inebriated. Not to mention how much it hurts tomorrow's workout, sometimes even the day after if you're old enough. Also, just speaking anecdotally, and I've heard this from others too, although I don't have the science to back this up yet, alcohol itself does not seem to stop the fat loss process. It can actually dehydrate you and you'll wake up looking surprisingly more shredded if you're already lean. But it does seem to put the brakes on muscle gains. So if you lifted heavy that day, keep in mind when you drink that night, those potential gains are probably going down the drain. Whew. And that about wraps up the basics of successful diet training. I know that was a lot of info, so please rewatch it if you need to. But it also goes so much deeper than I could ever cover here if you're interested. As I've mentioned before in another video and will continue to, I highly recommend Tom Venuto's book, Burn the Fat, Feed the Muscle. Tom is a god of dietary fitness training, and I originally learned all I knew about the fundamentals from him back in 2007. I then reread his book probably a dozen times, and then I went and read his sources, so much so that when I talk about the fundamentals, it's actually hard for me to distinguish which thoughts were his and which are mine. He also runs a big community of fellow dieters he calls burners, which can provide you great support if you need that. And I'm not even being paid by him, I swear, but I should be. I've sold about a dozen of his books for him by sending people his way. Hey, thanks for watching. Stay tuned next week for the next fundamental, cardio training. You won't want to miss it. And one final request from me to you. If you decide that you want to implement this and give it a try, please take some before photos, the you before you got in shape. You don't have to share them with anyone, but hang on to them because it would mean the world to me if you transformed your body and shared the end results with me so I can show others that it really works and it can be done. Good luck with your training and become worthy of your full potential.